Please start the timer. The influence of The Lord of the Rings on modern fantasy. An informational speech by Lailah Rodriguez. Fantasy is one of the most widely read book genres today. In fact, it's one of my favorites. I love fantasy. I've always been drawn to the heroic quests, the diverse characters, and the detailed worlds. Whenever I read fantasy, I feel like I'm stepping into a world that's not my own. In fact, fantasy books generate $590.2 million in sales every year in the United States, according to wordsrated.com. When I read fantasy, I'm joining millions of readers around the globe that are dedicated fantasy fans. But it wasn't always like this. Fantasy used to be a barren genre, and nobody really read it. J.R.R. Tolkien actually revolutionized the fantasy genre with his trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, and its sequel, The Hobbit. Before this, in the 1940s, fantasy was not popular at all. But now, it is so widely read. Why? Because he had such a big influence on the modern fantasy genre that we love today. His work, The Lord of the Rings, influenced books today like Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, or Throne of Glass. Today, I will explore how J.R.R. Tolkien's books, The Lord of the Rings, influenced the modern fantasy genre today. World building. Lord of the Rings has some of the most intricate and unique world building in all of literature. This is what has kept people coming back to the series for generations upon generations. Tolkien created original languages for all the different races in his stories. Along with the original languages, he created diverse cultures and detailed landscapes. Some of his original languages are Quenya and Sindarin. These languages are Elvish languages, and while they are unique from each other in the books, they're actually derived from real-world languages like Finnish and Welsh. Matthew Townend writes about this in his essay and explains how this gives depth and perspective to Middle-earth's history. Tolkien also created a lot of diverse cultures in his stories. Pictured here is the Gondorian flag and the Rohan flag. This is an example of cultural diversity in Lord of the Rings, adding depth and history to the stories again. He also created many detailed maps and many descriptive landscapes in his stories that made the world feel realistic, like you're able to step right in through the page. Geography Hub explains that even his fictional kingdom names, like Gondor, are derived from his own languages, like Sindarin and Quenya, giving even more detail to his worlds. Thanks to Tolkien's world building, like his detailed landscapes, his original languages, and his diverse cultures, many authors like Brandon Sanderson and Sarah J. Maas have taken inspiration from that in their own stories. Character archetypes. J.R.R. Tolkien introduced many now familiar character archetypes that would become the backbone of modern fantasy today. Frodo Baggins is a good example. His story follows that of a chosen one, an extraordinary person, or an ordinary person chosen for an extraordinary task. Other examples of chosen one characters are Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars, or Harry Potter from J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. Tolkien also used the wise mentor archetype, like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Some other examples in modern fantasy are Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars and Chiron in Percy Jackson and the Olympians. From his two popular archetypes came many different stories after. He also gave his characters realistic character traits. All of his characters are heroic, noble, and brave, but they are by no means perfect. They were tempted by power and they made selfish decisions. This leads to an emotionally engaging story because these characters have good intentions, but they are human and they are flawed and they make mistakes. This is what keeps readers engaged in the book and emotionally involved. Storytelling. Tolkien's storytelling techniques are still used today by many writers, such as his epic questing, like Tolkien introduced the idea of the epic quest, and it is still used today by Rebecca Yarros in her Empyrean series and Sarah J. Maas in Throne of Glass. In her own words, Sarah J. Maas credits Tolkien's epic questing with inspiring her own works. This demonstrates how Tolkien's storytelling skills are still deeply influential in fantasy today. Tolkien also created a wide cast of characters for his detailed landscape and historic world building. These characters, including the familiar archetypes we see today, give everyone someone to relate to, and a hero to root for, and a villain to root against. This wide cast of characters technique is also used by Brandon Sanderson and George R.R. Martin in their popular epic fantasy series, and is another example of how Tolkien's influence stays alive today. Multiple perspective storytelling is a very popular way to tell a story today. Tolkien's wide cast of characters paved the way for this. Although Tolkien himself only used a few perspectives, the use of all of his characters inspired other authors to soon add multiple perspectives to their own stories. Being able to see the story from different views of different characters gives the story more depth and shows how every character's individual storyline adds to the overall plot and theme of the story. Tolkien's influence is still very much alive in modern fantasy today. Like Samwise Gamgee said in the second book of The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, we're in the same tale still. Don't the great tales never end? While individual stories may end, his influence lives on in popular works like Harry Potter, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Game of Thrones, Throne of Glass, and many more. Many authors have accredited him with inspiring them to start reading and to start writing, and even inspiring their individual storylines. Tolkien's detailed world building created worlds that felt big enough to travel to, and intricate enough to explore. His familiar character archetypes are now widely used and recognizable throughout the world in fantasy and other fiction too. Along with his original languages and detailed landscapes and give me a second. Tolkien's storytelling style still influences people today, like his wide cast of characters and multiple perspective storytelling. That's prevalent in a lot of modern fantasy stories today. All stories can be traced back to a common ancestor, and for the modern fantasy genre, that ancestor is The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Most modern fantasy authors can credit Tolkien with the history of their genre, and modern fantasy readers can say thank you. Thank you for listening.